if a senior airman has a misstep, the whole institution focuses on the senior airman, right? Because they should have known better, but they're very junior, so we really focus on. But the higher they go up in rank is the less that we focus on it, which is wrong. You should focus the equal amount.
Yeah.
So I remember how you treated that commander, and you treated him with dignity and respect. He had a misstep, took over the squadron, and I think positive karma came around years later,
Yeah.
when your commander did the same thing for you because of what you did years in the past, right? So it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how polished you are as far as the technical expertise side of it. If you don't get to know them and make that connection with them, then it doesn't matter, because when they do have their worst day, whether they're having suicidal ideations, they're not going to turn to you if you haven't put in that time and effort on the front side.
I wanted to be everyone's friend. I wanted to be a popular. I wanted to be liked. And all three of those are wrong. And in staff meeting one day, the whole thing went to hell. It just broke down. I mean, people were laughing and making fun of each other and joke. I'd lost control, basically. I think I remember slapping the table and saying, "This is effing ridiculous. I'm out of here." And I walked back to my office, and I got followed by one of my flight chiefs. Her name was Jody James. And Jody followed me and walked into my office and closed the door. And she said, people don't want you to be their friend. They need you to be their leader. It was like a punch in the face. I was like, wow. So that was a great wake up call for me.
Welcome to Unbreakable Leadership, a no-nonsense podcast for leaders who want real-world lessons. I'm Peter Pollock, and with over 30 years of military and corporate leadership, I'm here to share struggles, successes, and practical advice that actually works. We'll look at real leadership stories that matter, focusing on attention, integrity, and growth through failure. Let's get started.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen, for the third installment of my podcast, Real Leadership, Unbreakable Leadership. That's what we talk about today. And I want to introduce my third guest, but I want him to introduce himself. Phil and I worked together. He's a retired Chief Master Sergeant. We worked together at Kadena Air Base back in 2011 to 2014, that time frame. So, Phil, I'll let you introduce yourself. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what level you retired at, because it was pretty impressive, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Definitely haven't got comfortable calling you Peter yet, so I'm just gonna go with sir. I'm just gonna go with sir, because I worked for you and with you for a several number of years. But I'm Chief Master Sergeant retired Phil Easton. I came in the United States Air Force in 1990, right? So say it
Last
like that.
century.
Yeah, I know, right? Can you believe it? 35 years ago. It's
We're
crazy.
old.
It's crazy, but came into the Air Force after growing up in Los Angeles, California, moved to Irving, Texas, my junior year in high school because of the violence in Los Angeles, graduated there. Didn't want to go to college, so I came into the United States Air Force. I thought I wanted to go into the Marines, but I didn't know what the Marines did back then. My mom, my mom knew what the Marines did. She was like, not no, but heck no. She said, you can go in the Air Force. None of my other siblings or cousins or anything were in the Air Force. My mom's brothers, my uncles were drafted into the Army. My other cousins were in the Navy, quite a few of them. My uncle Phil, who I'm named after, was in the Air Force for 4 years, came in the 70s. But I was the first person to graduate slash retire from the United States Air Force. So came in 1990 as an aircraft maintenance technician, avionics troop. I worked on KC-135s. First duty station at Plattsburgh Air Force Base. Second duty station was at Tinker Air Force Base, where I worked AWACS. After that, I volunteered to be a basic training instructor for 5 years. Then I went back to maintenance. I worked C-17s. Then after that, worked F-16s. I was then selected where I met you down at Kadena to be the PME Center Commandant there at Kadena, and then over to the Mission Support Group. And then my first command chief job was at Malmstrom Air Force Base, then Ramstein, then 3rd Air Force, USAFE Command Chief, and was blessed in my career in 2022 ending, but from 19 to 22 as the U.S. European Command Senior Enlisted Leader. That was for Operation Allies Welcome, the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war. So we had an absolutely blessed career. Married for 34 years, not soon to be, just went over 34.
Yeah.
And we'll be 35 next November. And then we have two amazing daughters, one that I'm visiting here, her and her husband here in the UK. She just had our first grandchild, and she's an X-ray tech.
Love that.
Thank you, thank you. She's an X-ray tech here. He's a cyber airman here. Her husband, TJ and Ari, and then our oldest daughter is in San Antonio as a occupational
OT,
as
right?
OT,
Occupational
yeah,
therapist.
OT,
Yeah.
also therapy assistant. There it is, as an OTA, and
Okay.
so super proud of them. So that's
That's
a little bit
awesome.
about me,
Yeah, congratulations. I actually heard you tell that story at your retirement, Phil.
right?
So it
Right?
was really good. And holy moly, yeah, retiring as the UCAM Command Chief. I went to your retirement and an incredible career. And moving from LA, I didn't know at the beginning that you moved from LA because of the violence over there and you moved to Irving,
Mhm.
Texas. I think that's tremendous. I mean, there's a lot of people have stories, right? I think you know a little bit about my story too. But everybody has a story, right? And it's part of being a leader is getting to know people, right? Is connecting. So let's start off with that simple question: how powerful do you think connection is as being a leader?
Yeah, so I think approachability, connectiveness, all those things are really the secret sauce to leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think about it. I would talk a lot, especially with frontline supervisors. You think that sometimes as frontline supervisors or first time supervisors, you think that just being the person that dictates the rules and enforces the rules and all those things are what's going to make you the best leader. It is that, but it's also making sure that you are very approachable, which is part of my leadership philosophy and our leadership philosophy. But making sure that on their worst day, that they're going to come and seek you out, right? But if you don't put in the work on the front side, that connectivity that you're talking about, that approachability that we're talking about, if you don't do that on the front side, if you don't know whether they're married, how many kids they have, what their kids' names are, and it takes time and effort to do that, right? Whether they have a dog, whatever it applies, if you don't put the time and effort into knowing those things, then we've all said the cliche over the years is that they don't care what you know until they know that you care,
Yeah.
right? So it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't
Yep.
matter how polished you are as far as the technical expertise side of it. If you don't get to know them and make that connection with them, then it doesn't matter because when they do have their worst day, whether they're having suicidal ideations, whether they've been sexually assaulted and don't know who to turn to, they're not going to turn to you if you haven't
Mhm.
put in that time and effort on the front side. So to
Mhm.
me, that's the secret sauce of leadership is making sure that you're very approachable and that you connect with them on a personal level and not just on a professional level.
Yeah, no, 100% correct. Absolutely. And you know, this is a great segue to a story that you and I discussed that we want to talk about. When I was the MSGCD, the deputy commander of the group, and you came over as the group chief, the group superintendent, I ran a little program called KDAP.
Yes, sir.
So for all those people who don't know in the audience, KDAP is a Kadena Disciplinary Action Program, and basically overseas as U.S. military, you fall under what's called SOFA, right? So if you do stupid stuff on base, we're not going to send you to the local police because they actually have no jurisdiction because of that SOFA thing. So in my position, and I didn't volunteer for it, but I ended up loving the job. I was judge, jury, and executioner of the and executioner. Take that for what it's worth, but judge and jury for people who did stupid stuff, and I'll call it stupid stuff, Phil, because it was.
Yeah,
They
agreed.
basically broke the law. They did something wrong, and every Thursday afternoon, I would have meetings as the KDAP judiciary person in charge. I think there's one story that you specifically came into. I want to ask you, tell us that story and what you saw of my interaction with those kids.
Mhm.
Because I still get messages today that, hey, in fact, I got a message the other day. I'll tell you about it after this. But tell me what you saw and tell us that one story about what you saw in KDAP and connecting.
Yeah, so it was amazing being part of because it's a very unique program when we talk about programs throughout the United States Air Force, right? And I remember sitting through many, probably 30 or 40 different sessions. But this one stands out the most because I just watched how you managed the situation. So let's go back to this would have been 2013. And I remember it was a young man, his name, I just won't say it, Jay. Jay came in with his mom, and she was having all kind of problems with him. He had some issues at the school. I believe there was some graffiti and some things that he was doing at the school that obviously that weren't tolerated and just mischief, right?
Mhm.
And I remember him coming in and he wasn't very talkative, not very emotional, just very to himself. And I remember that he wasn't taking accountability for his actions. You could tell that he didn't want to be there. You could tell that his mom was forcing him to be there. But it was really turned out to be what be the last straw as far as the school is concerned before they were going to require him to go back to the States with his dad
Sure.
because his mom was single mom there trying to take care of him and discipline. And he was a high school student, right? And I believe he was a freshman or a sophomore. And because he was my same age as my daughters, because I'll tell you why here in a second. That I know that. And I remember just the way that you handled that situation because the things that know about you and learned about you after I started working with you, the first thing I was like, when I first met you, it was like, what's this accent? What's his accent? What's this
Really?
accent
That was
got in?
important to you, Phil?
Yeah, that was. I'm like, what is going
Okay.
on here in the mission support group?
Is he even American?
I know, right? We got a foreign exchange program going on here where the deputy can be from Australia, but
Oh my
no. Uh, but I was like, man, he's a little bit loud at times too. What's going on here?
God. Oh, sorry, I'll
but
tone it down.
you're right. But then I was like, you know what? He's also very, very funny. And your humor and the way that you use your stories, right? You're a storyteller, right? And you use your stories to get leadership nuggets across or stories across. And I really, really, really appreciated those things. But the things that really impacted me the most was that because your leadership style is a little bit, I'll say unorthodox, not in a negative way, in an orthodox but very, very effective way of doing business, through humor, through stories, but very, very down to earth,
Yeah.
very, very down to earth, and leads with compassion. And that's what I noticed in this particular session was that you knew that he knew the kid, Jay, knew that what he did was wrong. He wasn't holding himself accountable. He wasn't respecting his mom. And the way that you led him to make sure that you gave him some tough love, but at the end of the day, you treated him with dignity and respect, and you led with compassion to the point where one of our solutions, me and you talked on the side. I was like, hey, you know what, sir? I really think I can help with reforming him.
Yep.
He loves basketball. That's all he cared about. At that
Mhm.
point, I was coaching a boys and girls team because my daughter played basketball. He was the same age as my daughter, going to school there at Kadena High. And you allowed me to take him underneath my wings and give him a second chance. Right.
Mhm.
So I remember that very distinctly. And that story turned out to be a great news story. He actually turned out he did great in basketball, ended up doing very good in school because you knew what buttons positively to push. You knew you found out what was important to him. It's back to that connection which you talked about, right?
Yeah.
We had one-on-ones with him, one-on-ones with his mom, one-on-ones with them together to figure out what's the right solution. You could have easily been like, hey, enough is enough. He's going back to the States. You had that authority and power, through our system and our program based on the level of the infringement. So, and I really appreciate how you handled that using all the things that I talked about and learned about you, but treating with dignity, respect, compassion, but also, making sure they understand and get the lessons that they learned in the right way were the things that I really appreciated through those situations. That's just one of many, one of
Yeah,
many
it's
stories.
no, I appreciate that. I really enjoyed doing that program, and I'll kind of tell you, I did take a pause last week. I received a Facebook Messenger from a person that does not Facebook message me, and
Mhm.
she was my daughter's volleyball coach
Mm.
over at Kadena when she was a freshman. Coach, let's just call her Coach. I won't say who she is, but she sent me a text out of a blue and said, I was talking to someone the other day. She works for the Army now. Coach works for the Army now. She was talking to someone that she worked with at Canadian Middle School, and she was at the high school. Coach was at the high school, and my name came up.
Mm.
These two people, 5,000 miles around, halfway around the world, about talking about me, and my name came up, and she said, "I just want you to know the impact you had on our
Mm.
kids. That some of the kids would not have graduated without yours tough love,
Yep.
straight talk to them." And
Yep.
I think a lot of it comes from, Phil, the fact that I can relate to these kids. I'm not saying I had a tough live life or anything like that. I went through some stuff, but who doesn't go through some stuff? But I could relate to those. So you're right. You said my leadership is a little bit unorthodox, which I appreciate that because we're going to go down that road a little bit. I teach leadership, and I know you and I have had many lunches and discussed this, not based on theory. I think
Right.
theory is great as a foundation. But when you have to deal with a person one on one, that theory goes out the window because
Yeah.
every single person, Phil, is different. Every
Agreed.
single person will react differently
Mhm.
to the same situation. People will react differently
Yeah.
based on where they come from, based on their experiences. What do you think of that? Bottom line is, I teach leadership based on experience, real
Mhm.
shit that happens, right?
Right.
Um,
Agree.
what talk to me about theory versus practical application. Talk to me
Yeah.
about that for a sec.
I do a lot of professional development and here in retirement that are based on theories. And there's a lot
Yep,
of theories
yep,
out there, right? What's effective as a manager versus a leader, or leaders born or not, all those things. But the thing that catches the attention of those that you're teaching are real time stories. And that's what they want to hear. They want to hear those leadership nuggets. How did you get out of X situation, and being real with them? Because a lot of times, and I know I was guilty of it as well, you don't want to really show any faults. You don't want to really show any failures, but the Air Force did really good, I think, towards the last 5 to 10 years of my career, probably closer to 5, about celebrating the failures.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, I know, General Slife from AFSOC,
Yep,
and he was one of the ones about, celebrating failing forward and feeling free
yeah,
to express those failures. And there was a lot of failures over my career that towards the end of my career and definitely into retirement that I focus on those things that I didn't do well to help those individuals to learn from them and to be able to navigate through those situations a lot better than I did. So I think real time stories are definitely more effective. I think coupled in with some leadership language and things that work, as
yep.
far as theory is concerned. But I think the most impact comes from those personal stories.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you talk about failing forward and learning from your mistakes. I think the problem with a lot of people today is they're afraid to fail, right? They're afraid to make those mistakes. But as a leader, as a human, that's how you learn, right? Now,
Yeah.
we certainly don't want to intentionally make mistakes so that we learn. Pollock says we gotta make mistakes to learn. No, mistakes will happen, right?
All right.
Mistakes will happen, but the fear of failure is such a and here's what it comes down to. Oh my God, we're going to get onto our Gen X conversation now about the fear of failure and
All right.
why people are afraid to fail is because in the 70s and 80s, Phil, when you and I grew up and we were riding our bike on the road and we had a crash, we banged our head or it skinned our knees or anything like that. There was no one to tell, right? It was just us and the bike
All
and
right.
blood streaming down your leg and you had to walk back home.
Yeah.
What will happen today? You'll put
Mhm.
that shit on video, it'll be on TikTok, and you'll get 1,000,000 followers because you fell off your bike, right?
Right.
But then what comes with that is the ridicule and the haters,
Mhm.
right? Do you remember me going to the Kadena High School and talking to the auditorium full of people? Were you the group chief when, or was that K Ray? I can't
Yep.
remember. I
Yeah,
went
it might
to
have been
high
K.
school
Right.
and I basically talked to them about keyboard courage. So, Phil, about keyboard courage, when I talked to these, the teachers got kind of mad at me when I told them this. But when I was in the auditorium at Kadena High School, they wanted me to talk about bullying, right? And I know where they were going, and they had a lot of, and this directly ties into what happened at KDAP and me seeing
Mhm.
after so doing stupid stuff and making threats and stuff like that. I got up there and I said, when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, if someone was bullying us, we used to go out after school, 3:30. Yeah, the whistle blew. We could all go home. We had a fight in the parking lot. We settled it right there, squared it up,
Right.
done, right? And guess what? The bullying stopped.
Mhm.
But I looked at these kids and I said, no, 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 but you guys won't do that. You go home and sit behind your keyboard and go, isn't she ugly? Isn't he ugly? I don't like the way he walks, blah, blah, blah. That's keyboard courage, right?
Right.
Because you're just saying stupid stuff and demeaning stuff and actually more psychologically damaging stuff. To wrap it all up, I really enjoyed doing the KDAP stuff. And I tell you what, if I could do that for the rest of my life, I really would, Phil. But let's move on to the next topic. You okay with that?
Yeah, I am.
Excellent. All right. So, do you remember when we were at Kadena together, the security forces commander got removed?
Very vividly. Yes, sir.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So, my boss came in and said, "Hey, I need you to investigate something." Long story short, I basically had to investigate whether the allegations into the security forces commander was correct. So I did that. I called one of my trusted agents up, and you'll laugh at this. Steve Lopez was his name. He won't mind me using his name because this is actually. I called him and I said, "Steve, can you come up to my office? I need to talk to you." And literally, he walked into my office, and I said, "Close the door." And he goes, "Yes, he did it."
Wow.
I hadn't even so the point is with leadership, and I want you to talk about this real quick, and then we'll talk about actually how I took over the cops and stuff like that. In leadership, you've got to realize somebody's watching
Right.
all the time. Have you had any experience at that with that? Like people watch and you finding it, wow, someone saw me do that?
Oh, for sure. And that was kind of the scary thing, as a senior leader, especially as I became a chief and then a
Yeah.
command chief. We always
Yeah.
talk about being in the glass house, right? And
Yeah.
someone always constantly watching and someone
Yeah.
always critiquing what you're saying. So,
Yep.
you're sometimes a little bit hesitant to say things, especially if
Yep.
it's outside the box or your personal values or
Yep.
things that someone may misconstrue that doesn't line up with the organizational values,
Yeah.
because you're constantly being watched, constantly being critiqued. And it's a part of leadership that's not the most fun part about it, right?
Sure.
But if you're leading with character, right, and that's what we talked about constantly, you're leading with character and you remain humble, right? One of the
Yep.
things I think allowed me to be able to continue into positions that I did and not get in trouble, right,
Yeah.
is that when you remain humble,
Yep.
and I've always felt like I am not a special person. I have been blessed to be in special positions.
Special positions.
Right. So it's nothing about Phil Easton. It's about the positions and
Mm.
the second star that I was be able to have on my stripes as a command chief.
Yep.
But there was nothing special about me because you and I both know, sir, that
Yeah.
if I got run over by a truck, there at Kadena, they were
Yeah.
going to find a new mission support group superintendent the next day, right? So there's nothing special about me, but you got to remain humble. But there is a real deal, a real thing about being in that glass house, and
Yeah.
it did impact me and the things that I did.
100%. You made me. I want to go off topic a little bit. It's not really off topic, but you talked about the position versus the person, right? So
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm.
So number one, leading with integrity. If you're a good person, you shouldn't
Hmm.
have to worry about everything else, right? You can't walk on eggshells and go through command or as a command chief thinking, "Oh my God, what am I doing? Is my left foot appropriately stepping in front of my right foot?" And yeah, I mean, that just gets tiring,
Right,
man. You
right,
just,
right.
you just can't do that, right? So
Yeah.
let's go back to position versus person in the position. And I think you and I may have had this conversation before, but in fact, I know we did, but we're going to tell it again. You've heard about the story with the ceramic mug, right?
Oh yeah,
Simon
that's right.
Sinek tells.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah, and for all the people out there listening, let's just talk about the ceramic mug. The ceramic mug goes with the position, not the person. Okay, and he tells the stories. This is Simon's story, not mine or not Phil Easton's. It's Simon Sinek's story. Or at least maybe he stole it from somewhere. I don't know, but I heard it from him. And I say it in my classes. I talk to people about this. I said, let's say we got a friend named John. John was a Secretary of Defense, and we called John down to do a speech on leadership, and he's actually Secretary of Defense. We fly him out first class. We put him in a limo. We check him into the Marriott five-star hotel. We pick him back up with limousine. We take him to the green room. We give him his coffee already in a ceramic mug. The
Okay.
ceramic mug on it doesn't say Bill or Bob or John or whatever the hell his name is. It says Secretary of Defense or whatever the hell he is, right? The
Hmm.
position. It says the
Position.
position. So John goes out, absolutely kills it, gives back his ceramic mug, and goes. Now, fast forward 5 years, right? He gets called again. Hey, whatever his name was, John, can you come back and talk again? He's no longer the Secretary of Defense. He is retired. He flies economy class with the rest of us. He catches a taxi or an
Right.
Uber, as they do today.
Mhm.
He stays at the Holiday Inn. No foul on Holiday Inns, but you get the point. He gets back in the
Yes.
taxi, goes to the green room before his presentation, and he asks the young lady who in the room, "Excuse me, do you know where the coffee is?" And she points to the coffee over there. And he goes and pours coffee in his styrofoam cup.
Hmm.
Goes
Hmm.
out on stage, kills it. He's a great speaker. The point of the story is the styrofoam we all deserve styrofoam cups. The ceramic mug goes with the position,
Position,
not the person,
person,
Phil. The
100%.
position. Because
Love it.
after John's
Mhm.
gone, guess what? Someone else drinks out of that ceramic mug,
Mhm,
right? It
mhm.
doesn't go with John. It doesn't say his name on it. It's the position. I mean, talk to me about that. I mean, I think it's a brilliant story. Have you
Yeah.
ever like seen someone get mixed up and thought the ceramic mug belonged to them?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I've we've seen them on the Air Force Times, right?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
some of them we've known personally, and some that we
Correct.
didn't know. And that's what happens, right? When you lose that humility and you think that the position is about you versus about those before you, and
Yeah.
you get caught up and think that all these things that you're receiving, that limo, that first class, that mug,
Yeah.
that is because of your accolades and because of your successes
Yeah.
versus the institution.
Yeah.
That's when folks end up on the front of the Air Force Times, right?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, we've seen it several times, and it
Yep.
always comes back to humility.
Yep.
Character
Yep.
and humility are the two things that when you see folks have stumbling blocks or have missteps, rather, it's because they lack those things, right?
Sure. 100%. 100%.
Hmm.
Let's finish this story on the cop commander. So he was removed, and I actually took over that afternoon. Like he was removed at like 2 o'clock, and I had to have
Hmm.
like a stand up at 4:30. Have all these people in the room,
Yeah.
and I told him one thing. And there's a point to this story. I told them, look, I don't know anything about being a cop. I really don't. I'm not a SME in the cop world, but I can lead you. I can get you to where you need to go, but you guys execute. Let me worry about all the other bullshit at the top, right? So as a leader, I have a saying, you need to know a little about a lot. As a SME, you need to know a lot about a little. What do you think of that?
No, I totally agree because as you go up the chain of command, right, you lose a lot of technical knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I was an aircraft avionics system technician. Over the years, I became over squadrons, F-16s. I was
Yep.
over a squadron that I had never worked the aircraft.
Yeah.
Right. I was the aircraft maintenance unit superintendent. I was the squadron superintendent of F-16s that I've never worked. Right.
Yeah.
So it's more about the leadership, being able to
Yeah.
lead programs, processes, and people. Right.
Yep.
And being able to do those things, but also having the humility to
Yeah.
realize that you've got to depend on those subject matter experts. You've got to depend on those folks that are working for you and with you to make sure that you get the job done. But you have to go in with that humble approach and talk and let them know. If you go in and make it act like you know everything, then they're going to consider you arrogant. They're probably not going to support you, and you're more than likely going to fail. So yes, I totally
Yeah.
agree with that statement, and it's evident. I mean, as a U.S. European Command Senior Enlisted Leader, let's just be
Yeah.
honest. I had never had a joint job before that position.
Oh wow. Okay. Let's not tell anyone. Shh,
Right.
shh. Let's not tell anyone. Nope. Oh, Phil, you
Right.
were great at joint stuff, man.
Right. Right. But it was about I got hired for my leadership, right? And the things and giving people the autonomy as well and
Yeah.
empowering them to do their jobs, right? And sometimes when you have too much knowledge, right, you've seen it where you've seen commanders that know the business because they were a flight commander, and then they moved up the ranks in that particular AFSC, and now they're trying to micromanage and do things the way they used to do it when they were turning wrenches, so to speak, as the generic
Mm,
term,
mm.
versus letting those below them do what they
Yeah.
need to do. So
Yeah.
sometimes having too much knowledge is a bad thing, especially in a
Yeah,
leadership position.
that's actually a really accurate statement, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes knowing too much about all this kind of
Hmm.
stuff
Hmm.
can because you start wanting stuff done
Your
your
way.
way, and there
Hmm.
may be a better way to do it. I mean, old
100%.
people like us, what do we hate? We hate change, right?
Hmm.
We don't like change, and yeah, actually, humans don't like change, right? It's the
Right.
hardest thing for us to do is change. But
Hmm.
yeah, so it can be a detriment if you're a SME and you take over a squadron as a SME, and you're like,
Hmm.
now you tell Bob on the front lines how to do his job. That's not your job as a leader. This podcast is actually called Unbreakable Leadership because I started doing what I do to teach people that it's okay to make mistakes. And that as long as you learn from mistakes, you can be extremely successful, right? If
Hmm.
you don't learn from the mistakes, then we have another issue, right? But
Yeah.
if you learn from your mistakes, you will continue to progress up the chain. And fortunately, that's what happened to me because I made a ton of mistakes. So before I tell my one of my missteps in leadership, the very first one in command. Let me ask you a time. Was there a time where you made a legitimate leadership mistake
Mhm.
and you like, oh my God, I got to learn from this, and thank
Yeah.
God it happened. Tell me about that.
If I looked over my 32-year career, there were really two, and I'll make both stories really, really quick.
Yep.
The first one was when I was a new chief at
Mm.
Masawa Air Base as the AMXS superintendent.
Okay.
We were preparing for the ORI. I was in charge of the actual plan to
Okay.
execute for generation of aircraft. And I had worked out an agreement with the maintenance squadron superintendent to use some of their personnel in some of our processes as far as making sure that the hazards are scrubbed when we have a simulated attack for nuclear biological warfare, and making sure that they're helping get the aircraft generated and ready for inspection and therefore ready for simulated launch for our O plan. And all the way prior to it, we had a great plan. Uh, but about 2 months out from the ORI, the maintenance squadron superintendent fleeted up to the maintenance group superintendent because the maintenance group superintendent deployed. And
Mm.
then one of the other squadron superintendents moved up into the maintenance squadron position. He was at the flight level when he moved up to the squadron and literally turned back everything that we had planned and prepared. And this is 2 months prior to inspection.
Mm.
And one of the things from a misstep standpoint that I've continually to work on, even into retirement, is emotional intelligence.
Mm.
Is being able to maintain calm when things become stressful. And I
Mm.
can tell you my emotional intelligence, and this is 2011, I was
Mm.
very, very, very low, very low.
Mm.
I had just been a chief for about a year, but I was in almost 2 years. I was in a squadron superintendent position. I had a lot of stress on me, and I completely flipped out, hung up on them. I'm sure I probably cursed at them, and I normally don't curse at all.
No,
And
you
so
don't.
I'll
You're a good
right,
Bible
right,
person. Go to church, and you never curse. I'm the one who curses,
right.
man. You don't curse, so you
So
must have been in a bad spot, my
I was
friend.
in a very bad spot. I can't think of a time in my career, I'll be honest with you, I was more angry, right? And
Yep.
because I felt so much pressure upon the success of our organization. And he literally turned everything upside down.
Mm.
And I didn't have the emotional intelligence to maintain the situation, try to resolve the situation, or find a happy medium. He pulled his folks out. I got upset. I said, fine, whatever. Long story short, after many, many really screaming arguments associated
Mm.
with him. And fast forward 2 months later, we failed the inspection. We failed the
Ah,
ORI. And
good learning point, though.
great learning point. But to this day, even at my at my going away, the group commander was there, and I'm literally in tears at my going away.
Yeah.
'Cause we found out the results of the ORI on the day of my going away,
Oh no.
and I'm crying. I'm apologizing to her for my failure, and I still to this day feel like
Yeah.
it was my failure, and because I should have handled that situation differently, right?
You didn't blame it
So
on anyone else, though, right? You didn't, and
no,
that's
no, I
huge in
took
this
yeah,
story. Is you did
hmm
not blame it on anybody else. You took
absolutely not.
accountability and said, "You know what? I screwed up."
I screwed up 100%. And then second story with that is when I was a command chief. So this is
Yep.
4 years later or so, my second
Yep.
wing, right? So I should know better. And
Yeah.
once again, emotional intelligence and frustration. This is the theme of me and areas that I continue to work and improve on. But I was working with the first sergeants. I was frustrated with them that the dorms weren't being held up to the standards that I was hoping for. So we had a meeting. It was there with airmen from the dorms and the first sergeants, right? And we were talking about inspections, and one of the airmen had talked about basically not being inspected, right?
Mm.
So it really triggered something in me, saying, "Hey, this is something I want us to get after." And at that moment, bad on me, I talked bad about what the first sergeants weren't doing in
Mm.
front of the airmen, in front of the first sergeants. And you talk about something that really damaged my
Yeah.
influence with the first sergeant council.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
bad, just bad,
Yeah.
bad business, right? But I learned from it, right? I mean, I can tell you for the next 10 or 8 years or so, 7 years, that never happened, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of my surroundings. A little bit of lack of humility on my part, knowing that I
Yep.
am the
Yep.
command
Yep.
chief,
Yep.
I'm the one that's in charge, and not paying attention, and being cognizant of those around me and how it would make them feel. Even though I got it off my chest, how
Mm.
does it make them feel, and how does it make them look in front of their airmen? So those are two moments that, even to this day, that I'm not pleased with my actions, and but I continue to learn from them.
The best leaders, I think, make mistakes
Yeah.
and they learn from it.
Yeah.
That is truly the best leaders, right? But you have to learn from it. Let's just move on to two. I got two stories because you don't
Okay.
Phil. You told two Phil. I have to
Okay.
now
I like it.
tell two. Um, First one was very early on my career, and the last one is I haven't had the guts to say it yet, but I will say it during this podcast, and I think you know where I'm going with that one. My first mistake when I first took command in 2007 out at Largest on the Azores island chain, about 900 miles west of Lisbon, yeah, in the middle of the ocean. Took command. And first time command, I was a major coming up for lieutenant colonel. So I think I just met my lieutenant colonel board. But I wanted to be everyone's friend. I wanted to be a popular. I wanted to be liked. And all three of those are wrong. And about 3 months into it, and I had a top staff working for me, man. They were great. And in staff meeting one day, the whole thing went to hell. It just broke down. I mean, people were laughing and making fun of each other and joke. I'd lost control, basically. And like you, my emotional intelligence, I got pissed. So it's probably like that phone call, right? I think I remember slapping the table and saying, "This is effing ridiculous. I'm out of here." And I walked back to my office. And I got followed by one of my flight chiefs. Her name was Jody James. And Jody followed me and walked into my office and closed the door. And she said, people don't want you to be their friend. They need you to be their leader. It was like a punch in the face. I was like, wow. I've been screwed up for this long and nobody said anything. And Jody had the guts once it was too late. And so that was a great wake up call for me. And I called everyone together and I apologized. I said, you know what? I like you guys, but I'm not going to be your friend anymore. I'm going to try my best at this command thing. And I didn't change at my core who I was as a person. So I was one of the things that I could always do is connect.
Yes.
But people took that connection as he wants to be my friend. And there's only a very few times I would say, yeah, I'm connecting with you, but I'm not your friend. Don't Facebook me. Don't LinkedIn friend me. Don't do anything I'm not that kind of friend, right? I can connect with you. I can associate with you, but I'm not your friend.
Right.
And I that was a big wake up call for me. And I think that's one thing that I learned in command is that you're not there to be people's friends. It's not a popularity contest. If it was a popularity contest, go and sell ice cream, dude. It's not, leadership is not a popularity contest. And I 2007 I worked, and I thank Jody James for following me out of the office, out of the staff meeting, down the hall into my office. She said they don't need you to be their friend. So anyway, you ready for this? You know where I'm going, right?
I do.
So this was the biggest mistake I made, and it was at the end of my career. I can't believe I'm already choking up about it. I had blinders on. In my last command, I had blinders on, and I thought I was untouchable. And I teach about that today, that people are not untouchable. And somebody's always watching. So it goes back to something that we'd already talked about. And I unfortunately, first of all, I created the perception that something was happening. There was an unprofessional relationship with one of my flight chiefs. And that perception became a reality. And I was removed from command for an unprofessional relationship. And, the dude who will go unnamed that removed me, and I do not actually hold him in high regard at all, not because he removed me. He did the right thing. I actually looked at him and said, thank you. He said, what? I said, thank you for removing me. I said, I can't do this anymore. There was a lot of stresses in my life. There's absolutely no excuse for what I did, but there was a lot of shit going on. And so I was removed, and I received some paperwork from the wing commander, and I went down there and wrote my rebuttal. And this is the part that I want people to understand, and this is really what Unbreakable Leadership is about. I sat across from a wing commander who will go unnamed. I love the guy. Gave me paperwork. I gave my rebuttal, and he said, first of all, thanks for being honest in your rebuttal and accepting accountability for what you did. And I said, absolutely. And I said, sir, and I literally said this, Phil. I said, sir, I just hope you don't think I'm a piece of shit. And I really said that. And he looked at me and without hesitation, he said, nobody thinks you're a piece of shit, Peter. He said, you made a human mistake, and we all have done it. And at that time, I realized that it's okay to be human. And again, learning from mistakes, right? But that's what this whole thing is about, Phil, is I'm trying to teach people that you're not untouchable. 2, you're not there to be everybody's friends. 3, we all fuck up, man. Excuse my language. We all fuck up, man. And it's okay. As long as you understand that you have to continue to get better. And all these mistakes, you keep growing. You keep growing as a person. And he said we're all human, and that's what I want people to understand. Nobody's a freaking robot, dude. And oh my God, please, if you have blinders on and you can't see anything else going around you, please take them off. And that's the reason I thanked my MSG commander at the time, is basically removing me was a punch in the face, Phil. It was kind of like Jody James walked into my office and punched me in the face too. And we all get off track, but I mean, look at me now, right?
Yes.
It's not like I gave up. I wanted to, sure as heck, I wanted to give up. I was like, my life is done. Okay, you talk. I'm tired of crying.
No, first I want to say thank you for being vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
That's, I don't know if you've told that story. I'm sure you've told it in other forms, but, something that's recorded and something that will,
certainly
people
not
can
this
refer
public.
back to this public, right? Right, this public. So I commend you for that. But we've talked about this story, and when the first time you told me, it didn't surprise me that at all that you took full responsibility and accountability. It's the kind you've always been a straight shooter, right, wrong, or indifferent. You've always been a person that has always, if you've had a misstep, you're the first person to admit it, right? You don't try to fake it. And I really appreciate you being vulnerable on this podcast, but also, you took accountability up front. You didn't try to make excuses for it or anything, right? And which means a lot about your leadership. But what I will say, though, a lot of times we talk about karma in a negative standpoint, but I'll talk about it in a positive standpoint. You talked about how your wing commander, treated you with dignity and respect when you had a misstep.
Yep.
Right? So let's rewind back to the story you were just talking about with the security forces commander, right? And I remember that time you treating him with dignity and respect, even though he had a misstep, right?
Yep.
And what happens a lot of times with senior leaders, I've seen it with officers on officers, and I've seen it a ton with enlisted on enlisted. When E9s have missteps, or really probably lieutenant colonels and above have missteps, we feel like they should know better, and they are not treated well when they have missteps. We've known folks that have been officers and enlisted, have had DUIs or done things that they shouldn't have done, right? Or other types of infractions. And sometimes many times, the institution will turn their back on the individual of senior leaders. Right. And I've been an advocate of this, especially in the last 5-7 years of my career, is that I don't care what the enlisted, from my perspective, because I was responsible with, for not carrying out the punishment, but dealing with the aftermath of such, right? When an enlisted person of a higher rank has a misstep, I go out of my way to make sure that they're taken care of, right? Because a lot of times people will just turn their back, they won't talk to them, and that's when people are most vulnerable for suicidal ideations and all those things, right? That's the time we should be focusing on the most. If a senior airman has a misstep, the whole institution focuses on the senior airman, right? Because they may have not known, should have known better, but they're very junior, so we really focus on them. But the higher they go up in rank, is the less that we focus on it, which is wrong. We should focus the equal amount. So I remember how you treated that commander, and you treated him with dignity and respect. He had a misstep, took over the squadron, and I think positive karma came around years later when your commander did the same thing for you because of what you did years in the past.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but what's the old cliche phrase? Pay it forward.
Pay it forward.
I mean, And what really struck me is that the wing commander said, "You made a human mistake. We've all done it. We all do it. Maybe not the same thing that I did." That wasn't his point. His point was we're all human and we make mistakes. And I think
Mhm.
that is what this podcast is about, is that
Yeah.
I'm trying to let people know that it's okay to make mistakes
Yes.
as long as you learn from them. And for me to make it to the position where I was, even though I made mistakes along the way, I learned, right? I don't know. It's just, I'm trying to, I'm going to go on my rant right now about all these people who post on LinkedIn about, leadership and management and EQ and stuff like that. Half of these people look 25 years old to me, and I don't know what they've actually done. You know what I mean? So people like you and I have lived it. We've lived it. We've made mistakes, but we learn and we recover, and we try and teach others
Agreed.
so that they don't make the same errors
Same
that we do,
mistakes.
right? I talk
Agreed.
about blinders now in my leadership 101 class. I talk about, do not have blinders on. Please, please, please do not have blinders on. And sometimes it is hard once you have them on to take it off. You almost, I would submit to you, if you have blinders on, you almost need to screw up so bad that you realize. Yeah, so Phil, I think it's come to the end of our time. I did want to say thank you very much for allowing me to talk to you today on Unbreakable Leadership. I think we discussed some super cool stuff here, some tough stuff, but we were real, and that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is keep it real. So I appreciate working with you way back in the day. Staying in contact. I remember being invited to your retirement ceremony and me showing up, and it was just amazing to see once you completed that MSG superintendent job, dude, you just took off. And it was really good to see. And you're a good person. You're a good human being. And I just super appreciate you being here. So over to you.
No, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your kind words that you just said. Thank you for this opportunity. Congratulations on your success post retirement as well, and success on your podcast, right? And I know this is the third one, but I would expect many, many more, because this is the type of leadership and information that folks are looking for, right? Because the great things that you're talking about is not just their stories from our time in the military, but there are things and that folks can use, whether they're military or civilian, right? These are just lessons learned that can be applied in any type of scenario.
Yeah.
And for you to have something that's based on stories, based on being real, right? And not worrying about status quo, and not, worrying about, being PC or anything like that. And you've never been that way. So you're
I was just about to say, I'm not PC.
So, which means you're operating right, true to yourself, right?
Yeah.
So, congratulations, and you're an awesome person too, right? I mean, we've had lunch together, we've had breakfast together, we've continued our friendship, post military, and Yolanda and I talk a lot about, now that we're retired, right? We can pick and choose who our friends are, right? When you're in the military, you're stuck with what you got, right?
Yeah. Good point. So, wow.
But when you're in retirement,
that's flattering, right? Phil. That's flattering.
Right. And that for us to be deliberate about staying in contact, having lunch or breakfast or whatever we've done over the last couple of years since I've been retired has been pretty awesome. So I look forward to your continued success, because your type of leadership and your voice is needed within this space. So I appreciate the opportunity for sure. I'm humbled myself, and I know who you have on the docket for 4 and 5, and for me to make the cut is pretty awesome. So thank you.
Thanks, Phil. And we will see you guys next week on this podcast where we talk about real leadership. All right. See you guys. Take care. And thanks, Phil, very much for joining me, for allowing me to talk to you about this.
No, thank
See you,
so
my
much.
friend.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Unbreakable Leadership. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to follow and share it with a fellow leader. Remember, leadership is about action, growth, and staying true to who you are. I'll catch you next time for more real world lessons. Until then, keep leading well. Strength and honor.